This is the Get Foxy Show once again. Today's guest, we have the amazing Chris Volesky. Chris, I've been wanting to have you on this show for a while because you, sir, are an expert in helping people with fibromyalgia. And I don't know if you knew this, my mom has fibromyalgia, and she's one of the reasons why I got into acupuncture.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, right off the bat, I know all of us acupuncturists tend to have a story about how we got into the medicine. So can you tell us briefly about your journey into acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine?
Stubbornness, probably more than anything else. Actually, so I had dealt with some chronic pains of my own, chronic headaches, some migraine type headaches, a lot of neck and shoulder pain. I'd been in a couple car accidents and then some history of doing judo for a while and just dealing with pain kind of on a steady basis. And then kind of observing, family members, like grandparents and whatnot, and just seeing what life was like for them as they age. And to be honest, it scared me because I was already in pain. And then I see, you get older and older, and apparently you just remain in this pain, or the pain gets worse and you become less able to move. And it really terrified me. And I just wouldn't accept it. So I just started digging for answers. I had, honestly, at the time, I had never even heard of acupuncture or Chinese medicine for that matter. But just kind of through searching and trying a bunch of different things, I eventually ended up in an acupuncturist's office, and I started researching, and I found out, wow, this is amazing. This is what I got to do. This is my answer, So I got too curious, and a couple decades later, here I am.
So you've been at it for a while then.
I started researching it probably back in early 2000s, 4, 5 maybe. And then I made the decision to go to school, and it just kind of launched from there. I worked for some hospitals. I worked at a number of different clinics. And then I really started specializing more and more as time went on.
What was it about fibromyalgia? Well, first off, I guess we ought to spin this back a little bit for the listeners. First off, what is fibromyalgia? And what is it about fibromyalgia that made you decide you wanted to specialize in treating it?
Well, first of all, fibromyalgia, it's really a term for a complex, or like a large group of problems with different systems of the body. So I state it like this because it's very common that people will say things like, did fibromyalgia cause this symptom? Did my fibromyalgia cause this symptom? And no, it didn't in any of these cases. Really, fibromyalgia is a broad spectrum disharmony, which involves multiple organ systems like the liver, the digestive system, the immune system, the nervous system. And as this whole complex sort of goes haywire and nothing gets fixed, you start to end up with these problems of chronic pain, chronic fatigue, brain fog, and then a whole host of other symptoms that typically go with it, like insomnia, digestive troubles, problems dealing with stressors and whatnot. But the real key and why I define it like that is that it's not that the fibromyalgia itself is causing these problems. It's that all these problems are contributing to a picture that is termed fibromyalgia. And I think this is what's very unique about how we address fibromyalgia, because we treat it in such a way that we realize that we're not treating fibromyalgia, we're treating the systems of the body, and that's what gets rid of the fibromyalgia itself. Rather than saying like, I'm taking this for fibromyalgia. No, we're doing work to fix the nervous system, fix the immune system, fix what's going on with the digestive system. And then as these systems start working together, they start working together again, pain starts to drift away, energy levels come up, motivation comes up, and the whole picture changes. And you also asked another question, didn't you, about how I got into this?
Yeah.
So, so I got, when I first graduated from Chinese medicine school, I got offered a job by a hospital down in North Carolina. Now, I hadn't thought about North Carolina since probably high school geography. So I completely forgot that it existed, but I took this job. It was a fantastic job. And for whatever reason, the the population was just ripe with people with fibromyalgia. And then the two doctors that I worked with, they were both MDs. They had just tons of fibromyalgia patients, and they had a lot of empathy for them, but they didn't really know what to do with them anymore. There was only so far that the conventional model could get them, and it was typically managing with medications. So they asked me if I could treat it, and then so I took on a few of their patients, and they were doing very, very well. So they tasked me with putting together a whole, like, a program that they could enroll people in. So that was kind of the first version of a program that I was involved in for fibromyalgia. And then eventually I moved to another clinic where basically the demographic was almost all fibromyalgia, this complex of chronic pain, chronic fatigue, weight issues, digestive issues. And we were treating something like, or I was treating something like 30 to 40 of them a day. And then, and the clinic was, 100 plus every single day. It was very, very busy. So it kind of spiraled into that. And then eventually I met some other specialists, and it became, what it is today, a big, we've got a whole program set up for it now.
How does fibromyalgia, and again, you've said this is more of a group of symptoms kind of put together that's then classified as fibromyalgia.
Yes.
How does this all happen to someone? Does it happen the same way for everybody, or how does that work in your opinion?
It's not identical for everyone, but what we've been able to do is kind of break it into what we call stages, which both define groups of symptoms, but also which organs are involved and which body systems are involved. And then by understanding those systems, we can start to look at what process occurs that allows these systems to get so far into disharmony to create this complex that is fibromyalgia. And I think this is the way that we've set it up, I believe, is one of the most elegant and beautiful ways of looking at this. Because right now, the way we've got modern medical professionals looking at it, we've got sort of a bunch of different specialties that are trying to kind of claim that fibromyalgia falls under their purview. So, the neurologists will say that's a neurological problem because of the way nerves start to fire. The rheumatologist will say it's actually an autoimmune problem, even though we can't quite identify specific antibodies that would be able to term it an autoimmune type condition. We've got others that say it's completely related to stress and trauma. And it's not that any of them are 100% right or 100% wrong. It absolutely does involve all of these things. And typically what happens is that there is usually some kind of emotional trauma or long-term emotional stressor that can either be part of the cause or it becomes one of the aggravating factors of the condition. That's a big one. People getting sick is another big one. So sinus infections, different things like colds, flus, or different infections that we take things like antibiotics for. So this will very often happen. Somebody will get sick for a little while, and it seems like after that, they gradually start to develop this complex that's known as fibromyalgia. And what really happens here is they get sick, let's call it a sinus infection in this case, and they go and they get antibiotics for it, right? So their body kicked up inflammation. They had a fever. They had all this inflammation, which was the body's way of fighting it. And then we took antibiotics, which killed a lot of the infection. Now, I say a lot of the infection because the moment your immune system really kicks in and you get these antibiotics in your system, the pathogen basically freaks out and is like, holy cow, we are all going to die. This organism is waging war on us. So we're terrified. And so they start to coat themselves in mucus, and they create what's called a biofilm, and they adhere themselves to different parts of the body. Now, we see things like biofilm occurring in our teeth as in the form of plaque. We see it in things like multiple sclerosis in the brain and on the spinal cord. In the case of something like a sinus infection, it might appear as almost chronic congestion or chronic mucus, but it sort of hides and protects all these pathogens. Now, they will wait until your immune system is calmed down so you don't have these drugs in your system, and probably will even wait even longer until you become very, very stressed with something, which further retards the immune system, and then it can come out and proliferate again. This is an enormous problem with fibromyalgia and is one of the biggest causes of fibromyalgia flare-ups. Now, of course, we took these antibiotics to fight that infection. The problem there is the antibiotics work extremely well, but they also obliterate the microbiome in our gut, and this causes the complement of bacteria in our gut to be altered, and it causes inflammation and damage to the lining of the intestines, which allows food particles and metabolic wastes and microbial toxins to start to work their way into our bloodstreams. Now, as this progresses, it starts to tax the liver, and once the liver can't handle anymore, it'll basically get to the point where all this extra material, this toxin, these waste products end up in your lymphatic system and start to cause swelling. And then all this waste ends up in the muscles and in the connective tissue and produces these characteristic symptoms of what we call fibromyalgia, these tender points where you barely touch something and it's like extremely sensitive. You just go haywire, which is also why, the neurologist will say, oh, it's a nervous system problem because the nerves are sensitive. It's a problem with nerves firing too much. They are firing too much, but there's a good reason why. And then, you mix trauma in there, or you even just take the very fact that you're ill and feeling unwell for a prolonged period of time. It creates a profound amount of emotional stress, which just further creates inflammation, further creates nerve damage, and it actually starts to damage the brain over time. So it becomes this big complex of all these things together and to varying degrees. So for some people, they might have one stage that's more prolific than another, but they'll all have these flare-ups from a good variety of places. And it can be maddening because then you just know, like, oh, I'm having a flare-up. And sometimes you don't know why. Sometimes it's hard to identify why it is that you're having this flare-up because there's so many different causes.
That's definitely something that my mom has had to deal with. And just going, I don't know why I feel like garbage today, but man, has it really kicking my butt. And she'll go to the doctors and they'll be like, we can't really tell you. So it can be very, very frustrating for patients. So how, if they're having these symptoms, how can they go about either avoiding or getting better?
Well, so there's a variety of things. I mean, we put together a whole program to address these things. We use things like plant-based medicines. We something called Gasotransmitter therapy, which is basic internal exercises that they do at home, which helps regulate these body systems. But also looking at just a lot of the little day-to-day things. There's something that I like to call grandma style medicine, because historically, I mean, like my grandparents were on a farm. So if somebody got sick, if there was a problem, it's not that you could just run to a doctor. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have telemedicine back then. So grandma or mom back then knew how to do certain things. I know castor oil came up a lot, certain teas, poultices, things like that, knew how to do some bare bones type of medicine. So I like to refer to these things as grandma style medicine, just basic things that we can quite literally incorporate into our lifestyle that basically promote health and promote or keep our bodies functioning well. I mean, some of the easiest basic things, like I tell people to drink ginger tea first thing in the morning because it warms your gut up, it prepares you for food, it has a soothing and anti-inflammatory effect on your digestive system, and it helps you fight pathogens. I mean, it's one of the perfect things you can do. You drink like peppermint tea before bed. It seems almost too simple, but it soothes the mind. It helps address things like headaches. Again, it soothes your digestive tract, and it has this sort of descending action that helps assist you in sleep. So there's just tons of little things like this that I like to share with people that it seems so minor, so insignificant, but it can be absolute game changers. Just those two teas. I have a colleague that shares this with her patients who she treats a lot of endometriosis. And sometimes that'll knock out 50% of their pain right there. Just those two things alone because of the profound effect that it has. I talk ad nauseum about what our mindset is like because, fibromyalgia, it's so chronic that it can very slowly poison the mind and can put you in this place of feeling helpless after a while, because it's you feel like you're just a slave to this terrible condition. So something I love to tell people is every morning and multiple times a day, take a moment, to state what you're grateful for, show gratitude to other people. Take a moment and close your eyes, put your hand on your heart, and state out loud a few things that you're grateful for. It seems almost too simple, but I mean, there's research out there showing that just that alone, just taking some deep breaths and saying, I am grateful for having a good breakfast, I'm grateful for my kids, whatever it is, just those things alone can have as much effect as some antidepressant drugs. And I mean, to me, that is so profound. You're never going to get a side effect from that. Not only that, but you're going to essentially counteract that poison, and you're going to start seeing gratitude and joy and happiness in many more places in your life, because it's like you're providing an antidote to that poison. When you're in a state of gratitude, you're canceling out fear, you're canceling out anger and frustration. You're completely reversing the way that your brain is working. And this is something we teach to every single person that's in our program every morning. Gratitude every single day, because it sets the pace for what's going to happen to you.
I'm guessing you probably practice a little bit of this yourself.
Every single day. Well, it's funny, you bring that up, because I'm a firm believer in practice what you preach, take care of yourself. So I mind my diet. I mind, if I'm unwell or if I'm not feeling quite well, I look, okay, what's going on? What's out of balance? Do I need to take some plant-based medicine to counteract something? But I also take huge steps to manage my own mind. I mean, I have coaches that I see on a weekly basis to keep myself from poisoning myself with poor thoughts. Because if you go down that road, if you get into this place where you are constantly in a place of negativity, you'll find more, you'll attract more of that to you. And what I've found is that, yes, sure, bad things can happen, but I can control how I respond to those things. And if I can alter my own perception of things, it completely changes my reality. And then I start to attract good things to myself. I mean, it's one of the most profound pieces. And actually, when we first put together this program for treating fibromyalgia, the better part of it was put together by a couple colleagues of mine, doctors Andrew Miles and Shui Lan Chu, and Dr. Tom Whalen. And it was just incredible. I started, I adjusted my method, I applied it in the clinic, and I said, this is amazing. And I ran for years, and I finally said, you're missing one thing here. And it is the mindset piece that has to be addressed. And then, when you start to do that, when you start to really adjust that, even after care, people will stay better for years. I mean, they'll take care of themselves. I mean, I have a really wonderful lady. I mean, she came into the program at 69 years old. And I mean, that's advanced. I mean, there's plenty of damage to the body. There was multiple surgeries. And I followed up with her middle of last year. And this is about 2 or 3 years post when she went through the program, and just doing great, gardening every day, dancing with her husband, enjoying life. And this was, fibromyalgia was her life prior to that. And even outside of care, we're able to get that. I mean, and you listen to the way she talks, her mindset is so much better. Her and her husband. I mean, it kind of rubbed off to some extent as well.
You say program. This sounds like it's a little bit more involved than just coming in and getting a single acupuncture treatment. Can you elaborate on what your program entails?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically we turned it into more of a telehealth kind of program, especially in light of the way COVID kind of shut things down. But the thing that I realized fairly early on, acupuncture can be a great adjunct, but I realized that it wasn't actually necessary. That really the combination of these plant-based medicines, gasotransmitter therapy, proper dietary coaching, and then this mindset work, we were able to get just as great results that way, and it was less time intensive. So we basically put together this whole program. It's about 3 months long, and we coach, both me and my partner, we coach each client every single week. So I spend 30 45 minutes on Zoom with them. My partner spends 30 45 minutes on Zoom with them separately. We send them new customized formulas or supplements every single week. And then they have, their homework, the lifestyle stuff. They have videos that get sent to them every single day that guides them step by step through the exercises. So they can quite literally just open their email, pull open their video, and okay, here's what you're doing. And it's to the tune of about 5 to 10 minutes a day. It's not super time intensive. And then we just provide the support that they need, and we just work systematically, stage by stage. We begin at one place and we move on to the next. And if their particular brand of fibromyalgia means that they've got more emotional trauma, or they've got more problems with latent infection and biofilms, then we'll spend more on that particular stage. And everybody's got their one stage or two stages that are primary, but and so we'll make adjustment for that. But then generally after about 3 months, they're at a place where they're functioning better. Oftentimes they're going back to work, or they've gone from part-time to full-time work. Like I wrapped with one yesterday, and she was just saying she couldn't believe how motivated she was. She had things, that she'd been wanting to do for years and that she's actually doing, but she just didn't have the motivation, the headspace, the energy to proceed with that kind of thing before. So yeah, it's just, it became this whole program that we put together. And, we created this whole, a whole company called Fibro Solution. And it's been basically just taking off ever since.
You mentioned gasotransmitters. That's a term I don't think very many people have heard about. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So gasotransmitters are just, they're small gaseous molecules in the body. So oxygen would be an easy example, carbon dioxide, another one. But one of the most important ones is something called nitric oxide. And this wasn't even discovered until, I believe, the 1990s. But what we found is that through certain exercises, we could regulate the functioning of these gasotransmitters in the body. So, for example, one of the big problems that occurs in fibromyalgia is that you're dealing with chronic pain, chronic fatigue, and it becomes extremely frustrating. And you've already got gut problems. So the gut problem already makes you predisposed to stress. So you get stressed very, very easily. Your cortisol levels rise and your nitric oxide levels start to rise. Now, nitric oxide is important, but if you've got too much of it, or if it collects in pockets, it is hugely inflammatory, and it'll cause problems like that we see in fibromyalgia, like burning pains. So if it collects around a nerve, it'll start to disintegrate the nerve covering, the myelin sheath of that nerve, and create this burning pain and eventually a neuropathy. Or if it collects in the muscles, it'll make the muscles tense up. So you'll get this muscular tension. Now, over time, it'll start to degrade neural pathways. So it's like you become much more easily stressed by seemingly smaller stressors. So we found that with certain exercises, we can help to smooth the distribution of that out, so that it's not causing such a problem. We can kind of regulate these gasotransmitters, or we've got ways of increasing the amount of nitric oxide being produced in the sinuses, and this helps us fight infection. So we teach these basic exercises to people, and then they do them daily to help basically fight the condition off themselves. And that's really one of the biggest benefits, in my opinion. The plant-based medicines are great and very often necessary, but then you have these exercises that you get to take with you for the rest of your life. Most of them you can do while you're sitting in your car driving. You can do them on the dime if you need to. And they're fantastic. They're healing. I've helped people stave off surgeries. Once I had a lady with chronic sinus infections, and I taught her one of these, and then I sent her some medicine. Well, our postal service didn't do such a great job, didn't get the medicine to her, but by the time it got there, she said, "I can't believe how good I'm feeling just doing this exercise." Canceled a sinus surgery. It was just remarkable to see that.
That's brilliant. How can people find out more about your work and how to get a hold of you if they'd like to work with you in your program?
Really the best place, we've got a website. It's just fibrosolution.com. You can also find me. My website is just my first and last name, Volesky.com. Some people reach out that way. But we put together sort of a detailed webinar that people can watch that kind of talks a little bit more in depth about some of these things. And then if it is a good fit, we offer basically what we call breakthrough calls, where we kind of take a look at everything that's going on and see if the program is a good fit or not with somebody. And we spend usually a good 45 minutes to an hour on the phone with them, just making sure that this is actually going to be a good fit for them and that it's actually going to work for them. And that's kind of one of our big secrets, is that we vet beforehand. We make sure, like, okay, is this going to work for you? Because we want a success rate that is in the 90s or better. Because the key is that we don't want to take people on that we're not confident that we can help. And so we will make recommendations to what's going to work better for them.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you, Chris, the question that I ask all my guests. And that is, what does Foxy and being Foxy mean to you?
Easy. It's all in the smile. I would say that if there's anything that can pacify me, it is a good, authentic smile. And it takes a good spirit, it takes a good amount of health, and it takes a genuine person to have a smile like that. But when I see that, that's everything to me.
And who in your world's got one of those smiles at the moment?
My fiance. Now that's just in case she watches this. No.
I think you're safe.
But that's something I love. This also really why I love doing these via Zoom, because I can really watch somebody's face and the way that their expressions change over time. When I do these calls with people, it very often, I get people in tears, and their life is being controlled by this condition. And then, when I see them over the course of 3 months and they get to the point where they've just got this big, authentic smile. It's almost like the smile you see when you hand a child a Christmas present. It's just this, like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. I'm so excited about this. And they start to see that same thing come through. And, to see somebody who's been dealing with a condition for 20, 30 years, who's, maybe, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, to see that smile come back, it is absolutely magical to me. And it melts my heart. So that's the thing that I love more than anything else.
I hear you there. I the same way in my clinic. It's that smile when your patient lights up because their life's been improved and transformed. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
It really is. And I think it's in some ways almost cathartic.
Amen to that. What's the one thing? We're almost up on our time here. So what's the one thing that people can do to help prevent themselves from getting into this fibromyalgia syndrome?
I only get one, huh?
I'll give
so many pieces of advice. I want to deliver. It's the mind. If there's anything that we've learned as Chinese medicine physicians, and one of the oldest texts in the world, it says that the mind is the most important thing. And this is why I believe it's so important that we added this into our whole program. Being mindful of what you're thinking and how you're thinking is so important. That's why I would say take a moment every single morning and be grateful. Look over at your partner, your spouse, whatever. Be grateful for them. Be grateful for the roof you've got over your head. Grateful for the food that you've got in your fridge, in your belly. Just find ways of being grateful all day long, and every day will continue to get brighter and brighter. I couldn't recommend anything more highly than that.
There we have it. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you taking the time with us because I know you are a busy guy and you're doing good things in the world, my friend. Thank you for your service. Thank you for helping make the world a better place. And I honor you. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.